and one that really piggybacks off what you were just talking about, how there's different ways to explore the world, one of them being reading. And I think that's one very, very important and timeless way of exploring the world. What do you think about this phenomenon? Less people are reading. Like, it feels like almost nobody is reading per capita. What do you make of that? Do you see that as an existential crisis?
No.
What do you make of it?
No. Well, reading for pleasure has always been a minority occupation. Like, most people don't read for pleasure. Of the people who read for pleasure, only a small proportion buy books. Of the people who buy books, only a small proportion buy difficult books. It's a specialty market, and I don't think that's changing. What I do see happening, though, is that is being expanded in surprising ways by such things as YouTube videos and podcasts.
So you can find the value in something like that is just as valuable as something you could possibly find in a book.
Well, I think that the two technologies have their advantages and disadvantages. The thing about a book that you can't get from a discussion is that a book is like a portrait as opposed to a photograph. A photograph, it's click, that's that. A portrait you layer on and layer on and layer on and work over for weeks. You still have the same single image, but there's this depth to it. And a book enables you to think and then rethink and think and then rethink. And so you can go deeper in a book than you can, I would say, in any other medium. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can't go deep in a podcast. And it doesn't mean that there's no educational utility in podcasts. Plus, there's audiobooks, right? And
Sure.
people are listening to those.
That was another question. Do you think that audiobooks are just as valuable as books?
Oh, sure.
Just as good?
Well, the thing is, if you can really read, you can read way faster than you can listen. So reading is more effective, except that, and this is what's cool about podcasts and what's game-changing about them, I would say, is we can't read while you're driving.
Yeah.
You can't read while you're doing the dishes or exercising. And so all of a sudden with the podcast world, people have all this time that was used maybe listening to music, which is fine, right? But lots of people now are listening to like difficult podcasts.
Yeah, educational ones.
Yes, and long, detailed discussions about political issues that was never possible with television or even with radio for that matter. So, and people say, well, young people have a fragmented attention span. It's like, well, yeah, but Joe Rogan does 3-hour podcasts, and those do just fine. And your podcast is how long usually?
It's long, 2 hours. Generally.
Yeah. Right. So that's not for a fragmented attention.
Sure.
So no, I think it's good.
You're absolutely right. I think the number one person who listens to this podcast and podcasts in general are people who are occupied doing something else.
Yep. Yep.
And I think you're right. That's really valuable to be able to utilize that space.
Definitely. It's found time.
Right.
And so that's why the podcast market, I think, has exploded. It's like, oh, look, I can make use of commuters. People spend thousands of dollars a month in their time commuting. It's like, poof, all of a sudden you can make that. You can take a university degree while you're commuting, essentially, in terms of the knowledge that you can attain. Sure. So I'm not pessimistic about that at all.
And also the way that you have been using YouTube with your content is kind of amazing.
It's
the way that there's hundreds of thousands of views on your lectures and
and they're difficult.
They're
difficult lectures. Like they push me when I'm lecturing, and they're long. That's right. And there's a big market for high quality educational material. So, or demanding educational material, let's say.
Like when I was a kid, if I look at a word once, I can always spell it. Like I have it instantly. And I've been like that ever since I was little. And so I seem to have a facility for very rapid verbal comprehension. And then my father taught me to read when I was very young. And I think it was the combination of those two things that enabled that for me. I had the natural proclivity, a verbal ability. My graduate supervisor, very smart guy, Robert Peel, guy I really liked, he had trouble with spelling. I don't know why exactly that is. People have different talents, and I had a talent for immediate recognition and memory of words, and I'm also very verbally fluent. So I think mostly it's an innate talent. Now I also do know that the more you read, generally speaking, the faster you get. My wife has really, like, she always read, but she's really started to read a lot since she got a Kindle. Turns out she really likes her Kindle. She reads a lot more, and her reading speed has increased a lot. A lot of it's practice. You can try to speed up your reading by reading a little faster than you're comfortable with. I don't know the research literature indicating the utility of that, but practice is always useful. The other thing is that you want to make it part of habit, both conceptually and practically. A lot of people don't read because they're afraid of books. The books aren't their friend. So you might want to get a few books and kind of make them your friend. You can start with simpler books, like fiction. There's lots of good fiction written for adolescents and children. It's pretty straightforward. You can start there. If you're interested in philosophy, there's lots of simple guides like The Idiot's Guide to different topics, or a beginner's guide. I read those things all the time when I'm first investigating a new topic. I start with the introductory material. And I make time for reading, and that was encouraged in my family. Like, I always read before I went to sleep. I read, and I still do that. Somewhat less so because I've become so distracted by social media. But you set aside a bit of time every day to read, and for me it was always just before I went to bed. I'd go to bed, turn on the light, and read when I was a kid, for hours. And if you do something every day, you do a lot of it. And so I would say, well, if you want to read, if you want to make yourself educated, just put aside 20 minutes a day to read, or 10. Some small amount of time that you could actually steal, not 2 hours, because good luck, man. It's very unlikely you'll manage that. But 20 minutes a day, that's 2 hours a week. That's 700 hours a year. That's, even if you're a slow reader, that's a good number of books. And so you make it a habitual part of your life, and you decide that it's going to be something that you value. You investigate carefully what resistances you might have to that idea, because you might think, well, that's pseudo-intellectual, or there's something more productive I could be doing, or I'm intimidated by books, or I hate books because I wasn't good at reading when I was a kid and was humiliated because of it, or you've got something against intellectuals, or God, there might all sorts of resistances to picking up a book. And then you could listen to audiobooks. That's a good way around that. By hook or by crook, man. So you value it, you make it a regular part of your life, you practice doing it. And you need a higher goal too. It's like, well, why should you read? Well, it's so that you're more informed and you can think better. Well, why should you be more informed and think better? Because you won't walk blindly into so many pits. You'll be able to negotiate better in your life because you'll be more informed and more verbally fluent, and you'll have a better sense of how the world works, and be able to hold your own in conversations, and that'll make you more confident. Those are all unbelievably good reasons. To be highly literate is an incredibly massive advantage.